So Plato said that there is a what he called the dēmiourgos in Greek. That means a half-maker. I will not try to draw parallels to vernacular expressions that resemble that. But let's say, and it's called a half-maker because the substance, the underlying reality, the light that is hidden in the darkness, that part he did not make. That came from elsewhere when he came. But he made the forms. So half of the reality within which we live, which is the form reality, the material reality, the lesser reality, that he made. The other part he did not. Therefore he is called the half-maker or the demiurgos. So they came to identify the Old Testament deity with that demiurge. However, as let's say these heresies became more numerous and also more sophisticated, it came to be admitted quite often that, for instance, the Old Testament is only in part the message, the revelation of this demiurge. In fact, I think the Valentinian said that the Old Testament has three origins. One is the demiurge. The second is a little bit of material that filters through from the highest, from the true God, and you can find that in many of the Psalms. You can find them in the wisdom literature, such as the Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, Ecclesiasticus, and others. And then some are teachings of the elders of Israel throughout the ages. But certainly the vengeful, the cruel, the oppressive, the unyielding statements in the Old Testament come from this imperfect, intermediate, lesser deity. Now, I know and you know that even though we might look at this sort of thing with a somewhat open mind, yet in the back of our minds there is a tremendous resistance against it. And that is primarily because we carry the monotheistic obsession in our very genes in this culture in the West, A Hindu would have no problem with it. He said, oh yes, that's maybe it's in our pantheon, maybe it's Prajapati, maybe it's, various others. Oh yeah, that's quite possible, because the multi-centeredness of the God image is part of the polytheistic picture. But for us, that is the idea that there might be two gods is just awful. It's just, I don't know why, but it's just awful. It's just awful. We can't cope with it. It's crazy making. But what we need to keep in mind is that what these people meant was really is a supernatural yet imperfect being. More like an angel, You don't have to imagine an all wise, all good, omnipotent, omni this, omni that kind of a being in this regard, but a being that is somewhat limited in consciousness, even limited in understanding, limited in character. Now, all right, here is the and of course there are all, you might say, all the offices that the roles that this Old Testament deity comes to play. Okay, it's creator. Now, right then and there, a person with powers of perception and judgment could come up with quite a bit of criticism. Why? Because look at this so-called creation. Oh yes, it hangs together reasonably well, as when you kind of have the image of the Newtonian cosmos, that's kind of like a great big clockwork, that keeps going. But within it, there are very strange and very peculiar things. There is, first of all, in a mechanical sense, it works. The world, the cosmos, the earth, whatever you want to call it here. But in a moral and spiritual sense, it doesn't work. Because it's filled with injustice, it is filled with suffering, it is filled with death, it is filled with all kinds of really terrible and off-putting things for which there is no real moral justification. And about all the religious world of the monotheistic religious world can say is that, well, that's the way it is. You better accept it, not worry about it. Well, of course that's the way it is. We know that. But I think an intelligent person also occasionally asks a question that sounds more or less like, why? Why? You know? It's by no means unjustified. You know, we apply it to all kinds of things. Why should it be that way? Now, of course, along come the Easternizers, who sort of pick and choose and take out of the other religions like Hinduism and Buddhism what suits their purposes usually, and never really the rest. And they say, oh, well, it's karma. You see, it's karma. And so they weave into this picture a situation wherein in the long run and over many lives and so forth, there is a kind of retributive system going on, which sometimes is based on the idea that I hit you over the head in this lifetime and you will hit me over the head in my next life. Then we are, for a short time, we are even, and then the balance will be upset again. Now, of course, I am jesting a bit, but that's par for the course, at least so I think. Now, all right. Once again, the question arises, if indeed there is such a thing as karma, and if indeed it works the way various people feel that it does work, the question arises, why? Why? You know? And this, of course, is something that one should not approach, one should not question. But these peculiar people of old and throughout history, they did question it. And they said they would answer to the why by saying, the reason that these things are thus is because whatever consciousness put them together was not perfect either. These things were not designed and devised by a perfect God. They were designed by some kind of imperfect consciousness that, moreover, on top of it, was not at all concerned with justice and not concerned with whether its creatures are suffering or not. Now, I don't want to start out on my old route here, which is very enjoyable to me, but not so much to everybody else, as to what kind of, I don't mean just strange, I don't mean just unusual, but unbelievably and horribly bizarre things exist in this creation. And, the imagination of an H.P. Lovecraft or a Stephen King is nothing compared to what goes on in this world. It goes on everywhere. It goes on the human level, goes on elsewhere. And if you look at where you would really not expect maybe something so horrible, look into the insect world, which has a greater variety of species and subspecies than any other kingdom of nature. And the things that go on in there and boggle the mind, Incredible, grotesque, horrible things. Of creatures that come along and lay their eggs into the living substance of another creature, and the little ones happily hatch there and eat up while it is still alive, the other creature, and then go on their way. That's just one little manifestations, but there are many, many variations in the theme. As I say, Stephen King couldn't think of anything as horrible as what really goes on in this world. Now, all right, again, it's there. What are we going to do about it? Fortunately, we don't suffer that much from that, although we have our own sufferings. Or perhaps, have you ever been around where praying mantises are? You know, well, a couple of years ago there was quite a proliferation of them in northern Arizona, where I went to visit for a little while there, and the mantises were all over the place. And here I looked at a funny-looking mantis. It sort of looks bigger than the other. Well, it was the mantises mating, and the male's head was already eaten by the female. He didn't quite know it yet, and he still went on with his copulatory activities, but his head was not there. Now, I, of course, with my Hungarian sense of humor or whatever, I said, oh, well, this is not the first or the last time that a man lost his head over a woman. But really, all jest aside, I mean, these things are weird. If anybody designed this, it's not just intelligent design. It is devilishly cruel design. That's what it is. You see? That's what it is. All of these and many other factors indicate that the traditional notion of a good and wise and just deity having designed or created, I don't care which one we use, this material universe and ourselves in it does not make any sense. But the possible notion that this is an intermediate being that we are dealing with here, and that there is something that is good, the Greeks called it the good. There is something that is wise. There is something that is true beyond this creation, and even perhaps its creator, or at least its half-creator. That, I think, makes a certain amount of sense. And so when we find all throughout history the mystics, those who communed with a benign and a good deity, and so forth, then we can be assured that they appear to have made contact with a reality of a superior nature. Not this flawed reality here, but the reality of a superior nature. Now then, when we come to that, then we begin to see that the problem is with the kind of God that our culture came to believe in. A God image that is extremely imperfect, that is either immoral or amoral, that is seemingly without compassion, and that therefore is, let's say, very questionable and very off-putting to an individual who has himself or herself intelligence, consciousness, an innate morality, and looks at all of these things and will consider them very, very unfortunate and very reprehensible. So who is the God whom Christopher Hitchens and others are attacking? It is that particular God image. It is not the true God of the mystics, but it is the imperfect designer and creator of the lesser worlds. This is how, at least this is how the ancient visionaries who communed with these things have put it. So the notion of denying the existence of consciousness in and beyond creation because of the imperfections of creation is not quite right either. So saying that there is nothing here or nothing beyond is, let's say, contrary to ultimately to the data of experience. I think in one of the Psalms, maybe that's one of those Psalms that originates in a better place, the saying is made, saith the fool, dixit incipiens in corde suo, saith the fool in his heart, there is no God, Well, that is why it is foolishness to say that there is nothing there. If anything, there is too much there. There is all kinds of consciousness. There are all kinds of forces. And beyond these forces, there is something good. There is something true. There is something real. And there is an element, a fragment, a spark of that ultimate being, so these alternative mystical traditions say, in us. That is why we are able to conceive of it. That is why we are able to relate ourselves to it. That is why we are able to reach out toward it in prayer and meditation, in magic and in various ways, because deeply within us there is something that knows. Not just believes, but knows. See, this is the difference. That's why so much of what became conventional mainstream spirituality in our culture is based on belief. The euphemism for is faith. If all of our politicians, oh yeah, I'm a man of faith, or woman of faith, whatever the case may be, and that faith is belief, Well, belief is not the same as knowing. You can believe all kinds of things, and then you'll find out that they're not true. Right? But that there is a capacity within us to know, and that capacity exists because of a kinship in essence between the deepest self within ourselves and that ultimate consciousness from whence, according to the seers and the sages, we have come. And this creates an abiding possibility of connection between us, bypassing even the powers of this Demiurge who governs the world, shall we say. It's interesting to note, for instance, elements of this are present, especially in the New Testament, because it really takes, I think, very much of a brainwashed, either a brainwashed or a brainless person, not to perceive in the New Testament that the overall message of the New Testament and of the founder of the Christian religion, of Jesus, is very, very different from that Old Testament deity. Very, very different. Mercy, kindness, forgiveness, brotherhood and sisterhood, the underlying fraternity of the humans, these are the principles that are taught in the New Testament. There is no proof that the reference of Jesus to the Father is to the Old Testament deity. That is an assumption that was foisted on us, later on. Oh, this might interest some of you. I have come across, as probably some of you have, especially those who are of that nationality, of a Polish saint of, I believe, the very early 20th century. And that's Maria Faustina Kozłowska. And I've been reading some of her statements which were based on her communications with Christ. In one position, what does Christ say? Christ says to this saint, to this visionary, if you pray to me, and then Maria Kozłowska sort of designed certain prayers that are supposed to help this at the time of your death, I will stand between you and the Father without judgment, and everything will be forgiven. Doesn't that indicate that there is a discrepancy between the two? So the Father, doesn't say my Father, it says the Father. The indication is here again, as it so often is in the visions of the saints and of people of great spiritual vision, that while there is a power here that is very judgmental, that is very unforgiving, that is very harsh, there is something that can come from beyond that power. And that the great messengers of light, including the last great one, Jesus Christ, are of that order. And they bring, we see the Jewish term for it is mercy. The Buddhist term for it is compassion. But that is what they bring, and not the judgment. He whom the judge was not written about the good messengers of light. Not at all. Now, let's just, inasmuch as our time moves along with us greatly, this is the basic sketch. I think the answer to the anger and concern of the new atheists, as well as probably of the old atheists, is to come to recognize what kind of theos are we talking about here. Once again, I'm reminded of the really cute story that I encountered with my late landlord. My landlord owned this apartment house in Hollywood, an old Russian Jew, very nice old man. He died at almost the age of 100. And he knew that I was involved in religious matters and things like that. And then after he had some kind of sort of dangerous experiences, he came up to me one time. He said, say. He said, I'm an atheist. That's what he always said. I'm an atheist. Oh, I thought, that's fine. I said, okay. He said, but tell me, what's going to happen to me after I die? What's going to happen to me after I die? So I said to him, well, look, Mr. So-and-so, let me just tell you what I think. I think that where you are going, they are not going to care whether you had been atheist or not. That's not going to figure in the equation at all. You were a good man, you did good things, you took care of your family, everything. And those things will be more important. Are you sure? Are you sure? Well, I'm reasonably sure. But you see again, what was this man saying, as so many of them? I says, well, I'm an atheist, but at the same time there is something else, right? The atheist because he couldn't believe in the God that was held up to him as the God, and therefore in that sense he was an atheist. So there is no reason, I think, for a person of consciousness and for a person who sincerely tries and perhaps also ultimately succeeds in intensifying and raising his or her consciousness to be a total denier of divinity. But it is incumbent upon such a person to recognize that much that passes in religion and elsewhere as God is not really God, but some kind of intermediate consciousness. Once again, I have no investment in personalizing these things. Many of them, of course, the one way to express visionary reality is in mythological form, because that's about the only way that you can do it. That's the only language that is halfway adequate to the kind of perceptions that the great seers have. That's why they don't come forth and talk about data and facts, The seers and the sages, the prophets, the shamans are not computers, They are not concerned with giving you concrete information. They are concerned with giving you intimations of a reality that is beyond this world. And that's not easy to do. That's why a lot of people have highly unusual, insightful experiences in this world. I've met a lot of them, and they didn't talk about it, only under the most private circumstances. They were very, very shy about it and very careful about it, primarily because they said, if I tell you about it, you're going to think I'm crazy. I said, you know what, I'm crazy too, so come on, tell me. But that's why. It's so difficult to express, it's so difficult to make sense out of these greater experiences, that those who have done so almost inevitably put them in poetic, mythic form, And then the people who read that or to hear it recited derive their own intimations, their own flashes of insight, are stimulated to similar experience themselves. And so I think we can rest assured that if we try to do that, and if others try to do that, then we may discover, not all at once perhaps, and not in an overwhelming mysterium tremendum, as they put it in Latin, although sometimes that happens also, but in intimations that are like flashes of lightning, like the will-o'-the-wisp that moves over the countryside. We will begin to have intimations of an other reality that transcends earthly things, that transcends even the designer, and there we will find something that is true, there we will find something that is good, and something that is beautiful.